Have you noticed how easily we're evoked to create and relate connotations from a simple emblematic element? For instance, when you see a picture of an apple, who do you immediately think? Snow White? Eve? Maybe Sir Isaac Newton? What about a dove? What do you immediately associate with it? Freedom? Purity? Weddings? Ever since, the systems of representation were remarkably influenced and became the means by which relevant matters to ideologies are established. Crime drama television series, including Sherlock, a 2010 modernized adaptation of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes detective stories, created by Stephen Moffat, Mark Gatiss, and Stephen Thompson, utterly demonstrates however authentic, realistic, or text may be perceived. They are purely constructed representations of society, rather than solely reflections, recordings, or reproductions of another world with a pre existing reality.
We humans are just spontaneously exposed to the mass media, where our minds tend to be opened and brainwashed in ease and continuous periods. Consequently, representations become vastly familiar, unmediated, and natural, and additionally, in some cases, are unavoidably selective, foregrounding and backgrounding certain aspects as creators attentively explore stereotypes and prejudice. In a specific episode of a phenomenal crime drama, Sherlock, a scandal in Belgravia superbly presents representations of aspects in society including the power of grandeur and the influences of the quintessences on women through the utilizations of iconography, symbols, and motifs.
Vatican cameos.
Power is what most wealthy people possess, and it's all from money. Whether you disagree or not, money really does control everything in life of our modern society. How often do you command someone out of your provision? Do you have guards to protect you, or that obey to fetch whatever, whoever you need? When was the last time you wore a fancy suit or a fancy dress to go to a fancy palace? People who have the abilities as such are represented by the media as powerful, formidable, and corrupt, and the narratives of crime dramas emphasize it to the max. The very famous series of Sherlock is one of very many that epitomize the depravity of the rich, the government, and the authority through the use of iconographic elements. This well-known television show manifests how rich American officers had immediate authority even in a country away from theirs.
As shown in the clip, Sherlock deduced the disrespectful, malicious, and forceful way of how the officers conducted themselves towards Mrs. Hudson, threatening her for something they were looking for. We can only conclude that they were authority as they wore things that symbolized they had that position. This includes a gun, professional suits, and earpieces. On another occasion, Jim Moriarty, another vital character from the series that represent people seeking for power, shows the world what he can do after destroying the most significant facilities in London, including the exhibition of the Queen's Crown, the Bank of England, and London's prison cells. As an audience, we are positioned to be in utter shock due to the benevolent capability Moriarty displays, but in the end, feelings of anger struck us when Moriarty revealed that it was daylight robbery with willing participants who were most probably paid. The motif of drinking tea while the spectacle was occurring was evident enough to say that the participants, in addition, who were in authority, were relaxed and ready for acting. This settles that the rich plays with the rich.
Unfortunately, crime dramas have made the affairs of the wicked riches, dishonorable governments, and unrighteous ascendancies a typical representation and a serious fear amongst our generation, which makes us apprehensive about who we should really trust and believe in. Isn't it shocking how humans have become puppets of power and money, which is all derived from social anxieties like corrupt government raises corrupt people, for example, and we can never trust anyone, like Mycroft said, and it's all created by the entertainment industry.
While sex is a biological matter, gender is a cultural matter, which is closely relevant to wider beliefs and values in society.
Show me what it looks like to run like a girl.
Disregarding the distinction between biology and culture, dominant patriarchal cultures create ideas that gender roles are plainly natural, as the process of naturalizing gender arises not only through social structures, but through language and texts as well. Through the recurring motifs in A Scandal in Belgravia, the characters of women were denigrated and conformed to the stereotypical victimized, romantic, incapable, and emotional feminine characters.
The roles of victim and damsel in distress of women were manifested through the deficiency of defense and incapabilities of female characters, including the kind, caring landlady Mrs. Hudson and brilliant Irene Adler, in situations where both were forcefully captured and powerless, and eventually rescued by the drama's main protagonist, a great consulting detective and master of deduction, or simply the hero of the BBC drama series Sherlock Holmes. This is a typical representation in literature, media, text, and even in social perspectives.
Moreover, passionate scenarios involving Molly Hooper and Adler were also indications of the representations of women in our society, their usual engagement in love-based events. This was demonstrated through both of these characters' show of romance, unrequited or pure attraction, consumption of cosmetic products and sophisticated attires, and use of their physical figures for a hopeful impression to Mr. Holmes, and in addition emotion-based situations in which Hudson, Hooper, and Adler displayed sentiments and weaknesses in helpless conditions through their actions and need of help, stuttering and pausing speeches, and fragile facial expressions.
However, as more and more capable and powerful women such as Rosita Rivera, Malala Yousafzai, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Emma Watson independently stood on their laced-up boots, tattered sneakers, and killer heels,
Show me what it looks like to run like a girl.
these mentioned representations commenced to evolve, resulting in drastic changes in the system of representation of women in society. These were evident on the modified similar female characters in this certain episode of Sherlock, the characteristics of intellectual dominant and powerful women. In spite of all their emotive connections with Sherlock, the characters of Hooper and Mrs. Hudson remain adept professionals, beneficially assisting Holmes to lead him in the right word as a sharp pathologist and a psychic apart from Watson. But in Adler's case, represents as a manipulative and devious hindrance as the main antagonist of this episode, using her high intellect equal to Holmes and representing as an incredible puzzle to him.
As literature and other texts began to challenge the stereotypical views of society on women in a continuous manner, emphasizing and foregrounding men, whereas silencing and marginalizing women may be both overcame in the future, not only in fictitious, imaginative texts, but in reality too.
Mediums, specifically media, are highly successful in captivating the intriguing ears, flattering mouths, and eager eyes of the society. It continually and simultaneously feeds us individuals, stereotypes, various versions of reality, and constructed representations on the pre-existing reality-like world we live in, including the vile depravity of the wealthy, authoritative, and political profiles, as well as the created social norms for women, inferior, victimized, sentimental, and tender-hearted. In terms of crime dramas like Sherlock, henceforth, this becomes expectedly natural, and frisson of recognition strike us as media presents intertextualities that provoke individuals to suggest connotations on representations on society.
However, every one of us possess unique views that are notably influenced by life experiences, beliefs, and values. Thus, it is necessary to carefully consider that representations are not neutral and essentially requires interpretations, make modal judgments through our personal context and culture. Through the employment of conventions including iconography, symbols, and motifs, together with a personal context of consumption, an episode of a crime drama, Sherlock's A Scandal in Belgravia, have conformed and challenged the quintessential representations of political identities and the archetypal and revamped characterization of women.